Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 121, and we're going to talk about banks, uh, the banking world, in a very humanities, non technical, sort of so-called macroeconomic perspective. And I know some people hate macroeconomics, that it's not real, but there it is. These hot takes, quote unquote, or subjective thoughts, as I'm going to be calling it now, is basically what I would do with every class. I would begin every class with a piece of trivia or something that was a current event, a bit of news, and I tried to get people to realize that the stuff we were talking about in class, at least in my class, had relevance to the greater world, to society, to current events even. And they just simply need to make that connection, because college students are generally notorious for being focused only on partying. Where I taught, which was a state university, a lot of the students were working, so all they cared about was paying rent, making tuition payments, and graduating as quickly as possible. And so most of them didn't really listen to the news. And it was a kind of interesting part of the class. I think a lot of students kind of enjoyed that. And so I got into this habit of always commenting on current events, except now I don't have anyone to talk to. So I'm just going to put it up here on these subjective thoughts podcasts. Listen to it if you want. But anyway, it's just a sort of general, okay, I don't want to really understand the nitty gritty. I don't want to go into the technical stuff. Just tell me why I should care about it. What should I look for? And that basically is the approach of these episodes, the non-sermon episodes, right? So I'm not here to give answers for anything, but just to give a different spin, a different way of understanding what's going on, so that you can explore, certain possibilities, or how to either avoid a big problem, encountering a big problem, or preparing in some other way. So I don't go into specifics because, there are probably lots of different good ways of, being aware of what's going on in society today. So anyway, there was a survey that just came out by the Claros group. That's Claros with a K, Klaros. And they did a survey of something like 1,000 banks, and 282 of them are in trouble. In other words, they're on the verge of bankruptcy. And if you understand why they are in trouble, then you realize that pretty much most banks in Western countries are in trouble, just like they were all connected and collectively in trouble in 2008 with the big mortgage crisis. Well, we're right back there, except the problem is much, much bigger. Now, most banks are underwater because of two reasons: commercial real estate loans, right? They're coming due, and higher interest rates. And so if you've been following the news, you know that the Federal Reserve, the Fed, they have increased interest rates, which put a lot of pain on a lot of people who had flexible interest rate payments, right? They weren't fixed. And so as the interest rate went up, their payments for whatever it is that they borrowed, you know, from whomever they borrowed, they had to make bigger payments, and that's not a good situation to be in. What are we talking about? Commercial real estate. Well, in 2008, it was residential housing mortgages that got into a lot of trouble. So for less than a year, mortgage rates were brought down very, very low to like 1%. And so a lot of people bought houses with very little money down. But when the interest rates all of a sudden went higher, like, I don't know, I remember getting 5% on some certificates of deposit at a bank. And so the interest rates had to have been higher than that. So what that does is a lot of people just walked away from their mortgages. They just couldn't pay it. So since they didn't put a whole lot of money down, it was just sort of like moving out of your apartment, right? You're not losing a whole lot. But the banks who lent you that money, see, now they're on the hook and they lose a lot of money. And so they should have gone bankrupt. All those banks who lent and made bad mortgages, they should have gone bankrupt, right? They said, oh, this person is trustworthy. I'll lend them some money because they'll pay me back. And instead of paying you back, they just walk away and turn in the keys, as they say. And so a lot of banks got in trouble. And so the government had to bail them out. I don't know how much they gave, but I know that they gave Europe a crap ton of money, something like $15 trillion, because the problem had spread over to Europe as well. Now, commercial real estate this time around, it's because of the lockdowns, in addition to higher interest rates. Okay, so the lockdowns came, everyone went virtual. A lot of people started working from home, right? Virtual working kind of thing. And so a lot of people realized they didn't have to actually physically be in the same office to be able to do a good job. And so occupancy rates of commercial buildings are way down. It used to be like 70% vacancies nationwide, but I just heard someone quote a statistic in San Francisco prior to lockdowns, vacancy was 5%, right? 5% of all possible places you can be were available. Now it's 37%, right? So that's 32% more uh, empty office building space, which means no one's paying rent, which means whoever borrowed the money to buy that commercial building, like an office skyrise, they can't pay their loan back. And so all the banks that lent them the money to build those buildings, they're in trouble. Okay. So there's that problem. But in addition to just simply, because some of you might say, well, what do I care about commercial real estate? Well, see, what you got to realize is that when you have a lot of office workers at a certain location, you realize that they're going to be there. They need to eat breakfast, need to eat lunch, and after work, maybe dinner and entertainment. Well, if they're not going to work anymore, then all of those businesses have to close as well. We're talking about restaurants, dry cleaning, bars, entertainment places, all of these different stores that started because it was a good business opportunity. Well, now you're just stuck holding the bag with no customers, right? So you have that problem. So it's not just commercial real estate, but it's also all those supporting businesses around commercial real estate properties. They're in trouble too. All right. So let's see. Keep in mind too that when you have these mortgages, they came up with this idea where you package a lot of mortgages together and then you resell them. Uh, and they do that like at least twice, right? You repackage all of these mortgages, and sort of traditionally speaking, they're generally safer. So you're not putting all your eggs in one commercial building, but now have a finger in several large commercial buildings. So even if one goes down, the entire investment doesn't lose. But if they're all toxic, right, if all of those loans are not going to get paid back, then a lot of people are going to lose money. And what a lot of people don't realize is that pension funds, retirement funds, all of these different other entities are buying these mortgage backed securities, right? So these sort of investment products that are basically giving people an opportunity to invest in commercial real estate. Well, a lot of people don't realize that their retirement, that the company that they are working with to invest their money has bought a lot of that kind of stuff because it was supposed to be really, really safe. Uh, and by law, you have to invest a lot of the money in safe assets. Well, they're not really that safe. So, should you be worried? Well, a lot of students would say, well, I don't have a lot of money, so why should it bother me? Well, number one, I just said, if your family is involved in one of those local businesses that are near those office buildings, then you're in trouble. But then also a lot of potential employers, a lot of families are suddenly going to find themselves in financial hardship because what they were relying on for income, it's a lot lower than what they thought it would be. So if you don't have a lot of money so going back to the banks, right? So the banks also are invested in these toxic mortgages, right? Mortgages which potentially are not going to be paid back. And so they're waiting for these mortgage payments, which may not come, right? So a lot of people are working from home. They're not, businesses are not renting out commercial office space. And so a lot of people are in trouble. 282 banks to be more specific. But you have to realize that if those banks go down, then you might see a cascading failure, right? Where all of these banks are kind of connected. And so if some of them start going down, going out of business, then a lot of other ones start going out of business, right? They're sort of connected in that way. And it causes a kind of panic. Wow, that bank just went bankrupt. What about my bank? And people start getting worried. They start looking to pull their money out of these smaller banks. Did I mention that the 282 banks were generally smaller banks, local banks, right? Well, they're going to take their money out of that and look for a bigger bank, a regional bank, a JP Morgan type bank, and try to move all of their money there. And so when you pull out all of your money from a smaller bank, you potentially could be putting them in trouble, especially if you're one of those big whales who park a lot of money, you're a small business, and so you have a large balance at that bank. But now you're worried, and so you pull it all out, which then puts a lot of stress on those smaller banks, right? And so you see that it could be kind of cascading problem, right? Domino effect. But if you have less than $250,000, maybe the FDIC will cover it. But you have to ask yourself, well, if all of these banks start going under, what will be the response of the United States? Will they have another pandemic, right? Bird flu, people are starting to talk about that now. I think it's Australia where they're already announcing that there's going to be food rationing because there's going to be food shortages. So they're prepping people for this. Also, you begin to see all across America, food processing plants are going up in smoke. It's kind of weird coincidence, right? Also, there are stiffer regulations being imposed on farmers and farms. Why they make our food, so why go after them? And so it's all this weird stuff. Is there anything behind it? Who knows? You can do your research and try to see if there's a connection or not. But it is kind of interesting how we are seeing that a banking crisis is about to come up. And so the government is going to probably try to rescue them, bail them out again. So what would be the cover? How will they get it so that people will, remain in the dark, just say, oh, the government is doing their best for us, right? Maybe uh, that's all doom and gloom, but the government might print massive amounts of dollars like they did during the lockdown and 2008. But of course, that means inflation will get a lot worse because that is what inflation is, money printing. It's not about price rising. Price rising is a consequence of all the money printing, right? You're diluting the purchasing power of the dollar. So you need more dollars to be able to buy whatever it is that you want, right? It's like diluting your orange juice. So you think you have 5 gallons of orange juice now, but it all tastes like water, yellow, orange colored water. And also you have the problem that everyone who invested in America, who are holding on to dollars, they want to get rid of their dollars. They're going to de-dollarize, get rid of treasuries. And so the situation will become worse for us here. Other countries won't trust the United States, right? What are you going to pay us in dollars? Who wants dollars, right? And so who is going to invest in America, right? It's possible that when the dollars become worth less and less, it becomes cheaper for other countries to invest in America. Except the problem is there's no rule of law here any longer. I talked about the Trump prosecution. I talked about some other problems that are happening in law. And so other countries, other companies, large companies, they don't want to risk a big investment if they know that the law will not be able to protect them, especially when you see people start yelling about greedy corporations and they come after these large companies and take all their stuff. Well, they are going to lose a lot of money. So why risk it? Why just invest it and build businesses in more stable countries, right? And there are a lot of countries that are becoming more and more stable as the influence of the United States and the dollar wanes, right, as it declines. Also, we see another problem of the United States where they are stealing the assets of other countries, and that would be Russia in particular, like $300 billion worth of assets that Russia has. You know, they just basically seize it and say, oh, we're just going to give the interest of these assets to the Ukraine because they're all good people there, right? I'm sorry, I have to laugh because they are notoriously fascist, you know, bunch of Nazis over there. Not all of them, but their government, right? So it's an extremely corrupt place. And yet, you know, we're going to violate all these international laws, seize another country's property, and then start using it for ourselves. That's pretty crazy stuff. And what makes it even crazier is that we still do business with Russia. 25%, like a couple of years ago, 25% of all of the uranium that is used for nuclear power plants here in the United States comes from Russia. 25%, right? And at the same time, we're like demonizing Russia and Putin. You know, it's weird, right? So it signals to you that a lot of this is politicizing. We're not seeing the whole picture. We're not being told the whole truth. And this is why you can't really be definitive about anything because there's just too much to know. I doubt anyone in government even really understands what's going on. So you have all this craziness. You don't know what the United States is going to do next, which is why so many other countries are starting their own currency system. And I talked about BRICS Bank, the BRICS system, right? And with every passing month, you know, there's something else going on with them. But BRICS originally stood for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Isn't it interesting that Russia and China, two large economies, and India are trying to break away from the dollar, and they're being targeted by the United States? Coincidence? Maybe. I don't know. But one of the requirements of joining the BRICS system is that you have to buy a lot of gold, right? The central bank of the country has to buy a lot of gold. And most people, when they make that switch to go into BRICS, they're going to move away from the dollar, which is very bad for us. Okay, coming to the end. All right, so that's basically what's happening. Just want you to know lots of different explanations for it, a lot of different reactions. What would the US government do to prevent people from panicking, from you know, freaking out, from becoming more like me, anti-government? Well, they're going to introduce CBDCs, right? Remember what I said. Once you hear banks are going under, bankrupt, you're going to take your money out. Well, how do you prevent that? Well, you just make CBDCs, central bank digital currency. There's nothing to take out, right? Because it's all digital money. And so once you realize everything is digital, then nothing will ever go bankrupt. You just give them more dollars, right? You can do it Johnny on the spot kind of thing. But of course, once you have CBDC, so the central bank digital currency, then all of your spending is tracked, right? You can't withdraw or use your money in the way that you want, right? Because the government is tracking everything. I mean, think about it. They tried to pass a legislation so that every $601 transaction that you make is reported to the IRS or to the government agencies, some government agency. So they are looking at your spending habits of just $600, whereas we're sitting on a $35 trillion debt. We're spending billions of dollars, and no one really knows where all the money goes. There's no accountability. There's no accounting. There's no record of where all the money goes, and yet they want to come after you for $601, right? And so the way you keep this game going, one possible way is CBDCs. So you might want to take a look at all of that stuff and something to think about, right? How you want to play it, how you want to prepare for it, how you want to go from here. Yeah, that's like months and months of podcasting to even get there. But just a little bit of taste, a little taste, particularly keeping all my old students in mind. So that's it for today. I'll talk to you next time.